Hi, we are group two. My name is Anjali.
I'm sorry, I'm Annie.
And I'm Thomas.
We're presenting a review of our current module, which is working in a culturally diverse world.
So I'm going to start us out here and let's go to the next slide. Um, I could spend some time talking about all the different words we have to define, but we kind of all know what culture is. It's everything about us from the way that we talk to people, our gender roles, the way those interact with each other, what's expected of us generally, and we all understand that there's cultures everywhere. There's diverse people all over the planet. Um, the thing that I would like to focus on more is, why are we talking about it? Because it's a thing. We need to develop this thing called cultural competency, where we have a base knowledge of cultures. And something that's important to note is, I think even in the book itself, it says not everyone's going to be equipped. So whenever I feel a little bit overwhelmed about having to learn every single culture, I remember that not all of us we're not required to know everything, but we are required to try. That brings us to the next slide. Um, it's all about being humble. Having humility is a big part of this process. We need to have a little bit of self awareness that our culture is different from others. It sounds super basic, but if we don't have that self awareness, then we could miss a lot of what someone across from us is trying to say and completely ignore them, or without even knowing, offend them pretty easily. Um, and expanding that cultural sensitivity where, you know, I, I feel like in order to be the best person to serve different populations, we have to be able to have this attitude of taking ourselves out of the equation and being willing to meet our clients where they're at. And so while I don't understand the intricacies of how that'll work in practice, I know that I'm ready to listen to the person across from me and not just decide I know everything about them before we get started. We can go to the next slide. And here's a huge list of definitions that we could read through one by one. But I I think I just want to emphasize a point that was brought that I think I've maybe brought up to a few people in this course before. But I think the real difficult part of this course for me is trying to take myself out and really listen to the people around me. And a way that we can do that is by knowing the roles of what we're supposed to be doing, and knowing how to advocate for the people that we're with. And if we're doing those things, we're going to end up knowing what needs they have. And that way, when we're trying to formulate plans, come up with things to help these people, we're focused on their needs instead of, oh, you came in with this addiction, these problems. Okay, let's solve those. It's more of, what does this person need, and what broad things in the community, in their family life, and things in general that are closer to them, what do they actually need to work on, instead of just viewing them as like a general problem or something like that. So I think, on to the next person.
So, in this slide, we're going to be sharing some examples. This first one is an example of a Native American client that shares how a story of that smudging and storytelling are important aspects to their healing. Rather than ignoring or dismissing this, the counselor incorporates modules that include like different coping strategies like mindfulness, journaling, music, and spiritual practices. And this was to help them rather than force them to self-disclose or process trauma in group. Trying to show respect for the cultural traditions while also offering new tools for them. The second example reminds us that not every client, I don't know if you guys can see it, will connect with like written materials, especially if English isn't their first language. And so for equity and inclusion, the counselor adapted materials like translated handouts, visual aids, and like verbalizing summaries to ensure that all clients were able to, receive information and have their needs met for that situation. So, and this is the beginning part of our case study. I'm going to directly read it from here. So Ellie Brooks, a certified substance use disorder counselor, facilitates a psychoeducation group at Sunrise Haven, a residential treatment center for adults recovering from substance use disorders. The group focuses on building coping skills, understanding relapse triggers, and exploring healthy routines. Clients come from diverse cultural, religious, and socioeconomic backgrounds. One of Ellie's group members, Tenzin, is a 30-year-old Tibetan man who recently relapsed following the death of his father. Another member, Greg, a 28-year-old African-American client, is navigating grief after losing a cousin to gun violence. A third member, Lily, a 45-year-old white woman from a rural community, often uses humor and sarcasm to manage emotional discomfort. The session focuses on healthy coping strategies and introduces the concept of rituals and routines. Let's see, sorry, I can't read it. As tools for emotional regulation and relapse prevention. Ellie encourages clients to share examples of daily practices that help them feel grounded, such as journaling, prayer, exercise, or creative expression. Tenzin shares that he finds comfort in chanting and would like to incorporate a brief mindfulness chant into his morning routine. Greg nods in support, but Lily rolls her eyes and says, "We're here to get sober, not to do weird rituals." Tenzin becomes visibly uncomfortable and withdraws from the discussion. Ellie recognizes that Lily's comment, though likely rooted in discomfort rather than judgment, reflects cultural insensitivity and risks undermining the group's safety and cohesion.
Okay.
And then on Julie.
Application of the principle IV. Ellie reflects on the Naadac ethical principle IV, which calls for counselors to respect cultural identities, challenge biases, and to foster inclusive environments, in which she responds by essentially redirecting with respect and try to cultivate a sense of, belonging without necessarily making anyone in the group feel like, they've been called out or like they've been put on the spot. And instead, Ellie calmly addresses the moment with the group members. She lets all of the group members know that everyone brings different strengths to the group, different traditions, and, everyone brings a sense of their own cultural, I lost my train of thought, their own cultural sense of belonging. What works for one person might not, work for another individual, and that's okay. And what Ellie decides to do is she practices affirming cultural identity. And Ellie thanks Tenzin for sharing, uh, and reinforces that mindfulness and spiritualness routines are, very valid coping tools. And again, what may work for one group member may not work for the other. So she invites other group members to reflect on, what helps them feel centered, grounded, without necessarily, requiring personal disclosure. And what Ellie also decides to do is she reinforces group norms. So she revisits the group's shared agreements around respect, curiosity, and openness. She reminds group members that there's that psychoeducation and that it includes learning from, diverse perspectives. everyone in the group brings, a different cultural background, and everyone is from, either a different religion, different ethnic background, race, and everybody has a different perspective to bring to the table. And then enhancing cultural competence. Ellie consults with her supervisor about cultural awareness and sensitivity and decides to incorporate, more so examples of culturally diverse coping strategies into future sessions. She decides that that's, not only beneficial to expose, individuals of the group of, different cultural norms within, many different backgrounds, such as, music, movement, storytelling, that individuals could utilize as coping strategies. And Ellie wants her clients to experience the many perspectives of, cultural diversity and what it means to be inclusive. And so the outcome of over time, the group becomes more cohesive. There's, again, that sense of belonging, that sense that everybody is included and has something to offer to the group. Tenzin continues to participate and shares that he has been using chanting as part of his morning routine. And Lily begins to reflect on her own coping habits and expresses curiosity about others' traditions. Greg shares that he's started writing affirmations, and Ellie's culturally responsive facilitation strengthens the engagement of each group member, but also models ethical care, which is highly important when you are, working with many different members of different backgrounds, religion, spirituality, religion, different ethnic backgrounds. It's very important to make everybody feel, that they belong and included and welcome in the group environment. And the reflection is this fictional case study illustrates how the Principal IV guides said counselors to foster inclusion without crossing clinical boundaries, right? We don't ever want to make anybody in the group feel uncomfortable, feel that, that they're, maybe forced to try out something that, they may feel uncomfortable doing or participating in. I think it's okay to personally expose individuals to different, practices and backgrounds, but still just ensure that everybody feels comfortable and welcome in the group. Ellie's group session highlights that cultural responsiveness may create space for diverse recovery tools and challenge bias with compassion. And that's, by honoring each client's identity and adapting the content ethically. And she promotes dignity, safety, and growth. And so here we have provided everybody with a handout, and that was curated explicitly for social workers in mind, from AI, just so we're clear. This is a personal survey, and we just would like to gauge, everybody's current level of cultural awareness. And this is something that we will have also attached, within our presentation. And you can go ahead and you can take this, wherever you go, and you can use it, on other platforms or in various settings. And I think as clinicians, I think it's very important to practice, cultural awareness. And, this is something that you could also in turn, hand out to other clinicians, counselors, individuals that you work with, and just ensure that everybody's practicing cultural awareness and fostering that inclusivity. So thank you guys for listening to our presentation, and we hope you guys have a good rest of your day.